Hi everyone, my name is Sophie, and this is my attempt to turn the book The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton on its head, so to speak. In The Outsiders, there are two different groups of kids from different socioeconomic classes: the Socias, which is short for the Socials, and the Greasers, which is the group that Ponyboy, the main character in the story, is a part of. The Socias are the rich kids, and the Greasers are the poor ones living on the opposite side of town. Ponyboy, having grown up with no parents and raised by his two older brothers, Soda Pop and Dairy. There's a cyclical violence and hatred that occurs between these groups throughout the novel, and although Ponyboy and a couple of the Socias, such as Cherry and Dally, seem to forego their differences and recognize their similarities at some points, many prominent characters die because of the violence that ensues. The novel ultimately consists of Ponyboy's individuality and aim to balance not just the desire to be known apart from his class, but also to maintain his loyalty to it. At first glance, this text might appear to be a single story of a gang in poverty stuck in the cycle, unable to get out, using violence as needed. I would argue that because of the characters of both Ponyboy and Johnny, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton is a counter story in the way that it calls attention to the single story of poverty and the social class system by telling Ponyboy's experience that is not often told. The story that is often told, or the stereotype, is that those in poverty are illiterate, unconcerned about socioeconomic issues, or disinterested in the world around them. Ponyboy's character is interested in reading literature, is seen as more perceptive of his surroundings, and appears to feel things more deeply than other characters, such as by the way he enjoys watching sunsets. Johnny is the one in the group of greasers that gives them a sense of purpose which they recognize in his dying moments. Referencing the definition of a counter story, The Outsiders complicates assumptions and stereotypes, helping readers understand what life is like outside of dominant culture. The book ends with Ponyboy sharing the story of his life in an essay for English class, which could be seen as a way of breaking the cycle of combating violence with violence, instead fighting the systematic struggle by writing his experience and therefore educating others. He does not accept the idea introduced in the beginning of the book that there is no way out of poverty. In my design of the multimodal text, one symbol or image in the background included is the sunset. Cherry and Ponyboy discuss sunsets when they first meet and later in the book. I included one of the quotes from Cherry, a Soch, saying, "It's okay. We aren't in the same class. Just don't forget that some of us watch the sunset too." This symbolizes the overarching theme of humanity in the book, along with the quote, "Things are rough all over," that Cherry also says, emphasizing that maybe the Socias and the Greasers aren't so different after all. To symbolize this, I drew a car in order to represent the Greasers. I also drew a Cherry because of her character as one that bridges the gap between these groups in her friendship with Ponyboy. Another image I included was the church burning down on the top of the hill in the town that Ponyboy and Johnny retreated to after Johnny killed Bob. In this scene of the book that eventually leads to Johnny's death, Johnny becomes a hero and sheds his identity by saving the children. It is only through his death that the Greasers realize his significance to their group, and in his dying moments he writes Ponyboy a letter that propels him forward to write about his story later. In recognizing Johnny's individualism, Ponyboy describes him as a guy that'll really listen to you. Listen and care about what you're saying is rare. And I included this quote that goes along with my argument as he continues. And I couldn't forget Tim telling me that he hadn't done enough, hadn't been out of our neighborhood all his life, and then it was too late. Emphasizing to his friends that they can make it out of this town and succeed in this life, something he wished he had done. Johnny states in his letter, "I've been thinking about that poem that guy wrote. He meant you're gold when you're a kid, like green, and don't be so bugged over being a greaser. You still have lots of time to make yourself what you want. There's still lots of good in the world. This quote signifies the theme in the book that might be viewed as a single story, that you can succeed if you work hard. But I am arguing that both Johnny and Ponyboy's characters go against the stereotype of lower-class kids in their intelligence, perceptiveness, and seeking of peace throughout the novel, only acting violently to defend themselves. Ponyboy states, "I'm supposed to be smart. I make good grades and have high IQ in everything." Again, I would argue that the novel ends with Ponyboy attempting to break the cycle of violence by writing his story. He states, "It was too vast a problem to be just a personal thing. There should be some help. Someone should tell them before it was too late." I decided to organize my argument as a spiral notebook because of the essay Ponyboy writes, which is revealed at the end to be the start of the novel. I chose to include the church on the hill farther away to represent the town that separated them from their identity as greasers, but I wanted to also include the green grass to signify the good in the world that Johnny spoke about, and the reason that Ponyboy wrote the essay, to shed light on the issues that they are facing, as well as combat the violence that occurs, exemplifying the counterstory that's told. I wanted to include the sunset in the back to encompass all of these themes, as well as the repeated one of sunsets mentioned throughout the novel, and the fact that Johnny's dying words were that there is still time for his friends to make themselves what they want. One challenge that making an argument in visual format posed for me versus writing a paper or submitting another written format is the challenge of narrowing down and summarizing exactly what I want to say in a way that makes sense and can be interpreted with clarity. Making the argument this way made me understand the symbols and themes in the book more clearly, but it was also somewhat difficult to be creative in doing so. Thank you so much.